Hi again, this is Elena with Marco Learning, restarting after a little bit of technical difficulties. Hopefully you guys can hear me just fine now. Anyway, today we are doing our part 3 of a whole series of Q&As with AP readers. Today we have someone that I really appreciate and have had the opportunity to work with before, Danny Sanchez. The human geo guy. I'm really excited to have him on today because he's just such a fantastic to the AP community. Let's go ahead and get him on stage so we can hear him and everything. I guess you all couldn't hear me before. Hopefully our audio will be working just fine. Welcome, Danny. And I can't wait to have you on today. And thank you guys. I think it was Katya who helped me out and was like, Elena, we can't hear you. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so guys, if you are in the beginning stages of preparing, now we're headed towards like the time crunch of preparing for your APs. So take this as like a pre-warning that you definitely need to get prepared if you are not already. So guys, I am going ahead and inviting Danny on stage. Let's make sure that we give him a warm welcome. Hit those hearts, give me some emojis, and don't forget to leave your questions. Leave your questions in the comments, or even better yet, so they can be featured on the screen, make sure you drop them in that question mark bubble there. That way I can actually reach them and access them during the live. Hi, Danny.
I can hear your wonderful voice. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, excellent. All right.
Okay. This is day 3, and this is day 3 of technical issues.
Okay. Technology, it's great until it's not. So
that's a theme. That's a theme. So how are you doing today? And tell us a little bit about yourself as a teacher and as an AP grader.
I've been, I'm doing great. It's another warm weekend here in Florida. I just finished up a run a few minutes ago. I realize I'm still sweating, so I hope I'm not too shiny. It's got a lot of surface area here. But doing well, just trying to get like that last like sprint to the finish. We are 12 days away. I like saying it that way to kind of get the sense of urgency across to everybody. Also, this is my 20th year teaching overall, my 14th year teaching human geo. And I've kind of lost track of the AP reading years. Like the pandemic did that. It's either, I don't know, it's been either 5 years or 27. It all blends together.
Who knows?
But realistically, about 6 or 7 years that I've been doing the AP reading. So
that's awesome. Okay, so where does AP Human Geo get read?
We go to Cincinnati, which I never thought I'd be like like the Board of Tourism for Cincinnati, but I love it there. It's great. It has a great downtown, lots of great restaurants. Go catch a Reds game while we're there. I've already got, I've got my tickets for the game. The first day that we get there, I'll be down the third base line. So I'm excited about that.
That's exciting. Oh my gosh, you'll have to do some live and help us live through it. I haven't been to the Midwest since 2020, so.
Yes. So I'm excited about that. Also, just the fact that we're doing it in person again. It's been a digital reading for the last couple of years, and obviously not as exciting as being able to get together with, I always call it a nerd sleepaway camp for adults, a bunch 800 human geo teachers together, just really nerding out. So.
Oh, wow. Okay, so out of those 800 human geo teachers, how many essays do you all accomplish?
It's always about 250,000-ish kids that take the exam. I think that might actually be a bit higher than that at this point. Then there's 3 FRQs for each kid. So each teacher is going to read probably about 3,000-ish, I think is the math on that. So yeah, it's as exciting as it sounds. It's as exciting.
Wow. It like blows my mind that you are a human and not a computer reading that. Okay, so how do you as a reader handle essays when you have handwriting that you can't read?
You know, I actually at every table I've been at, I'm kind of the handwriting whisperer because I have horrific handwriting myself. So
you got
I'm like,
that
oh,
scratch.
Yeah, they hand it to me. I'm like, oh, I can make that out. I know what that says. And then I read it to them. Very rarely can I not read something. The one thing I will say is when it comes to handwriting, as somebody who has bad handwriting, I always say to myself, there's the stuff that I just write real quick because I'm the only one who has to read it. Then there's the stuff that I know like some other poor fool has to read it, and I want to spare them, especially like if it's something that's like critically important to them or me. I do what I call I slow down, I write bigger, and I do almost like bubble letters to make sure that people can read, especially if somebody's well-being or their AP grade depends on it. So I turn on this is really important handwriting, and every person with bad handwriting has that handwriting because it happens kind of subconsciously.
So you know what you're doing. You do.
Yes.
You know what
yes.
you're doing. Okay, so speaking of handwriting and things that we can do and can't do, what words can I abbreviate when I'm writing for the AP Human Geo?
Well, they do tell us that you can take, like if it's very common things like CBR for crude birth rate or NIR for natural increase rate, that we can take a look at those. But I always establish for my kids, make sure that if you're going to use an abbreviation or an acronym, to make sure you establish it once by writing it out, and then you can refer to it by, crude birth rate, open parentheses, CBR, close parentheses. And then from there on out, you can use it just to really establish that they know it. Because my big thing is you have to put into these people's heads that you have no doubt that you understand what you're talking about, because they're more inclined to give you the point on something on the rubric. Like, oh, this kid knows what they're talking about. It's going to be more likely to be seen there.
Yeah, and that's actually good advice going forward, because I know like in college that was required. If you were going to abbreviate or use, we had to, like you said, set that expectation and define it beforehand, or we got points off, even if our teacher knew what we were talking about. So it sounds like they're definitely kinder at the College Board as readers, but I think that's a really good rule of thumb, period. Awesome.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The idea of just, we do, and I'm saying this for later too, they do tell us if there's any doubt, try to work with the kid. Contrary to popular belief, like, I have my own issues when it comes to College Board with other stuff, but I will say the fact that I don't believe they're out to get kids. So the idea of like, oh, they didn't like, abbreviate it properly, like doink them. Like, no, I don't think that's what that's not their intention. That's nobody's intention there. I sincerely believe that.
I think that's important to say because so many kids are afraid that like that's what's happening. So I'm glad that we can like qualm those fears. Like, you're real people. You are not like gluttons for pain or anything like that. Awesome. AP Bio Penguin says hi. She's at Disney on Ice, but she wanted to stop by and say hi. Hi. I wish I could be there.
Hi, Ms. Jones.
All right, so let's see. How much detail should I put into each FRQ?
Well, the way they're structured, each FRQ has 7 sections. It's A through G, and each one has a different verb. It's identify, describe, explain, compare. Identify, define, those you can keep brief. You're getting compare, describe, explain. Like, and especially explain, like they want you to go like almost next level. It's not just enough to show that you know something. You got to get into the why, because, and then you continue on from there. So when possible, always try to expand as much as possible for those verbs, for compare, describe, and explain. And the way I always tell my students, when I go over their own FRQs with them, and we're going over the rubric, and there's always like, man, I actually thought of saying that. I'm like, well, why didn't you? If you got something like if you know it's relatable, you know it's something that can be applied in a way that makes sense. And I'm not just saying like throw stuff on the wall, see what sticks.
Right.
I mean, in a coherent way that makes sense, that you can think your way through, then by all means, don't leave anything in your back pocket. Use every tool available to you. Leave no doubt that you know it. If anything, like if you need to over explain, that's fine.
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because how many times have you been like it's a time test, right? So you're thinking really quickly. How many times have you ever been in a situation where you need to, just in everyday life, where you need to communicate something to someone and you miss an important detail? My husband does this to me all the time. He's like, oh, we'll be talking about one child, and then he'll just randomly say something about the other one. And I'm like, you left me somewhere. And we have to make sure that, like you said, that cohesiveness is there, that we say, now we're talking about this thing.
Yes. And again, and it's funny, you talk about like the husband-wife relationship. Like I'll walk into the kitchen and like I'll ask my wife, why am I here? I came here for a reason. Try to stick to that reason why you're there. Focus on that and expand it as much as possible to really hammer home the point that you know the topic, that you know what it is that they want from you.
Yeah, and I think when you're reviewing, because we all review for the most part, we try to go back and look at it. I know you'll be in a room where it's quiet, but try to like whisper it aloud to yourself, because that's where you catch like just the silliest mistakes, because your brain thought it, but it didn't translate to the page.
Do you have a camera in my house? Like, I feel like you're watching me the way you're describing it. So.
Let's see. How should I maximize my time versus quality? That is a hard-hitting question.
That's actually a great question, though. And I kind of tie in a life lesson to it. So the way it's structured, you have the 3 FRQs, but they give you the booklet with the 3 prompts. Well, if the way typically the breakdown is, there's one easy-ish one that the people kind of rack up points on. Okay. There's one that makes you question, did I even take this class? And there's one somewhere in the middle. Okay. I always tell my students, if you have 75 minutes, 3 FRQs, the simple math on that is 25 minutes each. Mm-hmm. But if you feel you can really rack points on one, steal a couple of minutes from that easier one, spend more time on that, and put yourself in a position where if you're getting 5 or 6 out of 7 points on that, you just crushed it. If the average score on that nationally is about a 3, you just made up for the time you lost on the one you don't know, where you're probably not going to get more points anyway.
I love it. I love it. It's that same idea of like rushing to a red light. Yeah. Where are you going? Like, let's slow down, get these points while we're here. We're already here. Get these points. I love it. Like, get every single point that you can on the one that you're confident on.
And another way I emphasize that for my kids is I tell them, I'm a social studies person. I don't cry myself to sleep because I don't know calculus. I just accept the fact that I don't know calculus, but I try to be as good as possible what I'm good at. Try to get those 5, 6 points on the one you know best. The hardest one, you'll be lucky to get 1 or 2 points anyway, which is probably what the national average is going to be. So you hold the line on that one, and you really rack points on the one that is the easiest one, and you try to get as many points as possible from that middle one in between. That's where you earn that 4. That's where you earn the 5, where you rack the points there, because if you're only looking at a couple of points out of that last one anyway, then just accept it and move on from it. You can spend 25 minutes crying to get 2 points, or you can spend 10 minutes very simply getting the 2 points that are reachable on that hard one.
Yeah, as a test prep like professional, I love that's just not a commonly taught thing, because we get a quiz, we're like, we got to do, it's 10 questions, we got to do all 10 questions. We get 3 FRQs, we're like, we got to do all 3 FRQs, and we don't really think about like, where should you spend the bulk of your energy? And I think that's so perfect how you explained it. Spend it where you can get points.
And something to add on to that, particularly because it's not laid out easy, medium, hard. If the first prompt you see is the one that is the hard one, and there's been a few years where I see that, where the kid looks at they look at the first FRQ and they're like, no, like, it's it, I have no hope. Meanwhile, the second one, and the third one's a slam dunk, but you wasted 40 minutes of your 75, drowning in your tears as opposed to racking points elsewhere. So the first I tell the kids, open the booklet, look at all 3 prompts, and look at where you're going to make your biggest stand. That's where you're going to commit the bulk of your time, and then you work backwards from there, because you're not obligated to do them in order.
Yeah, it sounds like game planning is the hardest part of this, is just making sure that you have a plan and you stick to that plan. I love it. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so please explain for those of us at home who don't know what these FRQs consist of. I know that you said they have different parts, but what types of questions are each of these questions?
Well, the format of them is you're going to have one that's just information and you either know stuff or you don't. And then the second one has a stimulus, and the third one will have two stimuli. Again, not necessarily in that order,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the first things I like to say is if they've given you a chart, a map, or a picture, it's not there as window dressing. It's there for a reason. It's there so that you can use it and it'll help you answer the questions. There have been years where, you know, you're looking at an FRQ and the kids are like, what does this actually mean? And it's like, it's basically just asking you like what number's bigger. If you're looking at a chart, like all you have to say, identify which one has the most of something. Oh, well, sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rate of this, and they're just asking you to identify which region of the world has the highest. So that is kind of the starting point. There's some low-hanging fruit there. Go get it. Make sure that you are, you know, going to that tree and that you're able to get the easy points out. The other thing is they might tell you for the one that's two stimuli, you're likely to see compare two concepts. A constant theme in human geography is comparing things in the developed world compared to the developing world, rich world versus poor world. That's likely to be a theme. You know, gender roles, you know, how things impact male versus how things impact females. That is something that is going to be in play there. So again, a lot of it depends on the verbiage. Like I said earlier, identify, just can you point something out? Like the way I teach it, I'll put a picture of like a car on the board. What is that? It's a car. You just scored a point on the AP exam. Like it can be that simple. Define it. What is a car? A car is a means of personal transportation. Then you work your way up the ladder. Then you can see like compare, you know, a car to a plane. It's like, okay, well, car's more personal travel, plane's more public travel. And you can work your way up the ladder that way. They do tend to be, they usually give you one or two identify defines, and that's where you can kind of get the easier points. They do tend to skew more. 5 of the 7 will be more towards the harder ones, which is describe, which I always say describe is just like, tell me what a car is. You know, it's a metal vehicle with 4 wheels as an engine, gasoline powered. Okay, describe it. All right, compare, we already said compare. And then there's explain, like explain the impact of automobiles on suburbanization in America. And then that's where you're going next level. And you might be going all the way back to like Henry Ford and making cars affordable. And, you know, people coming back from World War II wanting to get access to the suburbs. You can also even get even deeper into that. You go into like the ethnic divisions that were created in society, how the suburbs became predominantly white, the inner cities became predominantly minority, like that,
Because
like
of an automobile, that's
yes, because of cars, which
yeah.
allows
Now,
us to be
the one or more car system is indicative of wealth in a family. You can look at somebody's driveway and tell usually how wealthy they are.
Yeah. Oh, considering how I grew up, I look at the 2 new cars in my driveway. I'm like, man, moving on up.
I feel you. Nobody knows how heavy and clunky those Buick doors like me.
Oh my gosh, my first car, I can't make this up. It was an '87 Cavalier station wagon. This is in '98. The thing used to flood when it rained. I had to drill holes in the floor so the water would escape. It was so bad. It was so bad.
Yeah. I'm from the north where we had to prepare our car to have us in it. So that was
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Excellent. Oh wow. So that's like, I wonder if they're gonna do a question on gas prices this
The one I will say, they do try to avoid things that are so current it's fluid.
Okay.
So probably not, but is that a theme that can generally be used? Yes, it might. You might not have something in the rubric that's specific to like gas prices right now, but again, energy is a big issue in human geo, and the idea of like how gas prices have increased over time. What does that mean for society? So that type of stuff could be incorporated, and then you can give like a supporting example of what's going on now. That's the type of thing that you could see on there.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the whole anthropology aspect of AP Human Geo. It's my favorite. Okay, so let me ask you, how do you grade differently as you get tired of reading responses?
You know, I will say this, and this is a little bit of inside baseball. They do a really good job of trying to keep us as fresh as possible.
Okay.
You know, we don't ever like grade, like the longest we'll go grading is 2.5 hours before we get mandatory break, mandatory lunch. You know, they don't like, they'll tell you, literally they'll encourage you, like if you're like just really stuck on one, put it down, go for a walk, clear your head and come back to it. So they are really good about trying to promote consistency, because, you know, the first kid whose grade you score, whose FRQ you score, deserves as much attention as the last kid you score.
Yeah.
So that is something that I will say they do make a concerted effort to try to make sure we're as fresh as possible. That being said, still day 5, you hit that wall and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've been doing this forever. And
Wow.
you're trying to get through. They call it hitting the wall. And at that point, you kind of do need to slow down a bit and just make sure you clear your head, get in a good headspace, and give the kid as much attention as they deserve, especially because typically you'll just score 1 the whole week. Mm-hmm. So when you're scoring that 1 the whole week, it's like, wow, how many times can I see? Also, sometimes, how many times can I see the wrong answer written? It's like, there's a lot of times and you're like, man, like nobody gets this. I mean, there's been times where, you know, like it's A through G, the 7 sections, and it's like there'll be one part like, man, like nobody's getting this point, and then I'll be like, Yahtzee, I got one. This kid got the E point, and you're passing it around because you're so excited that somebody actually got the E point. So I also try to remind myself, like, this might be the 2,324th one I've read, but it's only either the first, second, or third one this poor kid wrote. So I do always try to remember, like, this kid is, especially with 9th graders, this is their first rodeo usually. Yeah. And I do try to remind myself of that.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so that brings me to another question. What are some like common mistakes that you would like to warn our viewers about?
Common mistake. If they're asking you to compare 2 things, I can't tell you how many times I get like a dissertation level rock star explanation of one. I'm like, all right, let's see that second paragraph. And I'm like, where's that second paragraph? And they're not like, they didn't then flip it and actually compare the 2 things. They explained the heck out of one, but they left the second thing on the table. So that is a huge problem I see.
Do you think that happens because of time, or did they really not know that second one, or they just like spent so much time on the first one they just kind of forgot about the second one?
I think it's kind of an assumption, like, oh, if I can explain everything about this one, well, clearly then the second one's the opposite. But you have to go in assuming that the reader, and again, it's 800 human geo teachers, but you got to go in assuming they know nothing, and that you're explaining it, you know, blank slate style. And if you don't give that second part of the answer where you're actually, you explain one, but you're not showing the contrast, you are dropping the ball there. Okay. Another major like mistake that I see is, you know, I tell them, you know, this isn't 8 Mile. Like, this isn't a you know, drop the mic, walk away because you just won the rap battle. Like, legit, you have to try to expand your answer as much as possible. You have to try to really support it. Like, when you think you're done, take a moment, like, can I say anything else that establishes that I know this? Because sometimes when I score my own kids, I'm like, man, like, you didn't finish this thought, one more sentence. And that's like, oh, I thought of saying that. Like, say it. If you think of saying it and it applies, you know, get it. Because again, I tell my kids, it's okay to not know something. You're not going to know everything. I mean, when I take like the practice exams that they release, you know, like the last one, I remember there were 75 questions. Like, I got 4 wrong. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, you're not going to be perfect. Nope. Don't worry so much about being perfect that, hey, you know, if you don't know something, that's fine. But focus on the 3 or 4 parts that you know, and you can explain the heck out of it. And then go in and try to get the points on the trickier ones. Also, another bad habit has to do with, you know, if one of the harder parts at the beginning, they'll lock in their time. There's the same thing. You don't have to write them A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
No.
If you know A, B, D, E, write them in that order and then backtrack. The only thing I emphasize, make sure that you're labeling it properly so they know what you're answering.
That's
so
the key. Label and leave space, because I can't tell you how many times I've like, you know, gone on, I'm like, oh, I know A and I know B, don't know C, go on to D, moving on, and then C comes back to me and I'm like, let me, but if I don't leave space for C, and if I don't label.
Yeah, and then I have had kids save it this way. If they don't label it, then they come back, they'll draw an arrow, and they'll say like continuation of C. I'm like, okay, that's, but again, even if you didn't leave yourself the space.
Though. It has to be clear.
Yeah, you got to communicate it.
Yeah.
Also, a little point, again, like the kids, there's kids who write like a stream of consciousness and like A, and then they'll write, no, but they didn't label it A. And then they move on to the next one, and it's just one giant paragraph. And it's like, okay, this one's going to take a minute.
Yeah, that's hard to, like, you're going to slow down and your comprehension is going to be affected. So you never want to affect the comprehension of the reader, guys. Like, that's what they don't know.
Like, and I tell them, you could be the first one they read or the 3,000th one that they read. Make it as user-friendly as possible.
Yep. I think good advice that I can't remember where I heard this, but good advice that I was given was if you were trying to explain that prompt to, or answer that prompt for an incoming student, so someone really fresh, and you're trying to explain it to them, how would you do that? And I'm like,
I just stole something from you.
There you go. So I love it. I absolutely love it. You're not going to leave things out. You're not going to assume things. You're just going to explain it as clearly and succinctly as possible, because you also don't want to lose your audience. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your amazing advice. Is there any last piece of wisdom that you want to leave with our students?
The last thing I want to say is, you know, you got 12 days, make the most of it. After May 5th, if I know what it's like in my classroom, it's kind of, we exhale, we take it easy. Give you 12 more days of studying, review material, doing everything you need to do, writing practice FRQs, comparing them to the rubrics, looking at practice questions. Do as much as you can between now and then, because that's it. When it's done, it's done. And hopefully you'll have passed the exam, have earned a college credit. And I also wanted to say one thing, not everybody's going to pass the exam. I always tell my students, if you tried your best and gave me an effort and it still wasn't enough, we're good for life, because you gave me the effort. The only thing I struggle with is if you didn't give me the effort, you sold yourself short. You didn't give yourself the opportunity to be successful. And then that's where it can kind of snowball from there. But
yeah.
Again,
you
there's
sitting on the other side going, I wish I would have studied a little more. I wish I would have learned more about. You don't want any of that.
If only. Avoid the if onlys. Also, avoid becoming a story. I have like stories that have happened over the years where like a kid writes the first 2 FRQs, forgets to turn the page, and doesn't do the third one. Meanwhile, I've been standing on my head yelling, there's 3 FRQs all year long. I've had that one happen. I've had kids, and this is more for writing, but like on the multiple choice section, I've had kids answer all their questions on the booklet, then try to transfer their answers, and they run out of time. Like bubble as you go. Like, just like, don't become a story, because there's stories I share with the kids, like, don't become a story.
You know what I do? I do batch bubbling, because it helps me like see if I'm in the right spot and like time everything out. I'll do my pages, my, you know, left page, right page, and then I'll batch bubble. Yeah. And I feel good about that.
Yeah, just any system in which you are making sure that you're not saving it till the end, because that is where, yeah, I mean, I've heard the horror stories of kids. You know, I tried to read, like one girl, she tried to rebubble, only got up to 55. She left 20 questions blank. And I'm like, oh, like, no, you can't do that. And also for FRQs, like, oh, I don't know this one, so I'm going to skip it. The way the AP exam is scored, that's the equivalent of leaving 20 multiple choice questions blank. You wouldn't do either of those. So again, just put in the effort, try to answer everything. You'll be surprised what lands on a point. Because sometimes when I look at these rubrics, like, I'm like, hey, like, this is a good answer, but it's not on the rubric. And then there's times where it's like, they put that on the rubric, and everybody gets that automatic, to the point where you're almost like, you're shocked when somebody doesn't get the A or the B point or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, because sometimes you may not know everything about that subject. Maybe you've left it until the end. Go ahead and attempt that and like explain what you do know and give your best effort at answering the prompt. I don't want to say like throw random stuff out there like you said, but like answering the prompt, because you might, like you said, get a seriously, it feels like random point from the rubric. So
yeah, and I've seen it go both ways. I've seen kids who have the near perfect FRQ miss the easy point. I'm like, oh my God, this kid got 6 out of 7 and didn't get the definition. And then on the flip side, I've seen, oh my God, like this kid had like had no points, but the one they got is the one that I don't think I could have even gotten.
wow.
So yeah, so I've seen it go both ways. So again, don't leave anything, don't give up on anything. Try to make sure that you make a concerted effort to answer everything, no matter how challenging it might feel.
Absolutely. And guys, there's so many free resources. Please, if you're not already following the Human Geo Guy, please go follow. I mean, his name is right here. You can just click, follow, boom, done. Go and follow. He has excellent videos, excellent advice. He does word of the day. I learned so much just from following him, so I know that you can if you do so purposefully. Make sure you go check out our Marco Learning YouTube, where we have FRQs that weren't you the one who did that? The FRQs?
Yeah, I talked through writing the FRQs and went step by step. Yeah.
That's gold, you guys. You can literally, and this is kind of how I do it. If I don't know what I'm doing, I'll watch through. If I kind of already have a game plan, I'll pause, write what I would think or how I would be thinking, and then play and hear, you know, how Mr. Sanchez pulls the good stuff out. But guys, I'm so excited for you. You got 12 days. I almost said weeks. 12 days left. That's less than 2 weeks. Make sure you go and download our calendar if you don't already have one. If you don't have a calendar right now in your, I don't even know if you should use it on your phone, but if you don't have some way of blocking off time for your exams, you're behind the ball. It's time to do it today. All right, guys, it's been such a wonderful session. I'll see you again tomorrow. We're going to go back to 9 p.m. Eastern time, and this time we're going to be doing one of my personal favorites, AP Psychology with Liz Severson. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much, Danny. Until next time.
Bye, Lena.
Have a good day.